The world of Westeros is filled with moments that could have changed the course of history, but few would have been as impactful as what happened when Khal Drogo stopped Daenerys from saving the Lamb Witch. If Drogo had let her intervene, the ripple effect would have transformed their journey and the fate of many others. It was a cold night, and the Dothraki camp was alive with tension. Drogo had suffered an injury during a battle, and Daenerys, ever the devoted wife, insisted on finding a healer. Her desperate cries echoed through the night air, calling for someone to tend to him, to ease his pain. Drogo's response was swift and firm. He ordered that no healers were needed and that his wound was not serious enough to warrant any help. Yet Daenerys persisted, feeling the weight of her husband's suffering. Her compassion drove her to demand that someone come forward. From the ranks of the captured Lamb people, a woman stepped forward. She was a heavy-set figure, far more resilient than the others, and she carried herself with a quiet confidence. Daenerys, hopeful, turned to her, believing this woman might be the answer to her prayers. The woman introduced herself as Mirim Ma, a healer, claiming that she could make Drogo well again. But when she approached him, Drogo narrowed his eyes, studying her carefully. Though her voice was soft and her mannerisms submissive, Drogo could see something more in her eyes. They were flinty, focused, and filled with an intensity he'd seen before in his warriors during battle. It was a look that suggested a dangerous cunning, the kind of look that didn't belong to a mere healer. Drogo, a warrior at heart, was not easily fooled. He had fought countless battles and faced enemies who used poison as a weapon. The fact that this woman did not appear to be a fighter made her all the more dangerous in his eyes. She would not attack with a sword, but with something far more insidious. He immediately rejected her offer, pulling away as she attempted to tend to his wound. His voice was cold as he dismissed her, ordering Jorah Mormont, his loyal advisor, to speak for him. Drogo made it clear that no dark magic was needed for a simple injury. His men would tend to him and Mirim Ma would be kept away from him. "Great Khal, please," Daenerys urged, her voice shaking with desperation. "She can heal you. She can make you well again." But Drogo's response was unwavering. "I have no need for dark magic," he said with finality. "You would do well to keep her away from you, moon of my life." His words, though spoken with authority, pierced Daenerys's heart. She was silenced, though her own instincts told her that something was terribly wrong. But she accepted his decision, bowing her head in submission. She did not protest further. Daenerys turned and walked away, accompanied by her retinue of slaves, her heart heavy with the knowledge that she had failed to do something for her husband. Drogo watched her leave, his eyes following her as she disappeared into the night. Once she was out of sight, he turned to Jorah and began issuing orders, his mind focused solely on the practicalities of his rule. Later that night, as the camp settled into a fitful rest, Jorah and a handful of Drogo's trusted warriors entered the tent where the queen's slaves were kept. The soldiers moved with purpose, ignoring the cries of alarm from the slaves as they stormed into the tent. Their focus was on one person, Mirim Ma. The woman struggled as they rifled through her belongings, tearing her pack open and spilling its contents on the ground. Among the herbs and writing tools, something caught their eye, a small vial filled with a sickly green liquid. Jorah's expression darkened as he realized what they had found. Manticore venom. It was the same poison that could bring even a strong man like Drogo to his knees. The realization hit like a thunderclap, and without a word, Drogo's warriors dragged Mirim Ma from her tent and into the heart of the camp. She was brought before Daenerys and Drogo, the vial of poison presented as damning evidence of her treachery. Daenerys recoiled in horror, her face pale as she looked at the green liquid. She couldn't believe it. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. She couldn't have meant to harm him. Jorah's voice was firm as he spoke. "Look for yourself, Khaleesi." He handed her the vial, showing her the contents. This was found among her herbs, the same herbs she had planned to use on Drogo. His words were like a cold knife to Daenerys's heart, and her eyes widened in realization. As Drogo raised his head to the sky and roared in fury, his voice echoed across the camp, sending a message to all present. "The punishment for this is death. he declared. The camp fell silent in the wake of his words. The Lamb woman's fate had been sealed. Daenerys's gaze remained fixed on the woman even as Drogo's warriors readied their blades. The woman, though frightened, raised her chin defiantly, her eyes filled with a quiet strength. Then, she began to sing. Her voice was high and clear, carrying a haunting melody through the air. It was a last act of defiance, an act that would be silenced by the flash of steel. The blade came down, ending her life in an instant. Drogo, now relieved that his safety was assured, took a deep breath and ordered his healers to tend to him. But even as he recovered, the winds of war were stirring once again. Drogo had bigger plans. He had conquered the lands around him, but now his gaze turned toward the Seven Kingdoms. He knew that to achieve his goals he would need gold, ships, and weapons. And there was only one way to get them: by selling slaves. The road to Westeros had begun. But as Drogo moved forward, so too did the forces that would ultimately shape his destiny, and that of his son, the stallion who mounts the world. In the free cities, whispers grew louder. They had seen Drogo's power, and they feared what would come next. The Seven Kingdoms, too, prepared for the worst. But one thing was certain: Khal Drogo's name would echo across the world. His conquests had only just begun. With Mirim Ma's death, Drogo's resolve solidified. No one could betray him, not even under the guise of offering help. His empire, his Khalisar, would be built on strength and loyalty. The Dothraki, a once roaming tribe, had now become a force to be reckoned with, and Drogo's ambition had grown with it. He began making plans to invade the Seven Kingdoms, to conquer Westeros, and to lay the groundwork for his son, the stallion who mounts the world. But Drogo knew that conquering Westeros would not be easy. To do so, he would need resources, ships, gold, and weapons. These could only be gained through one thing: the sale of slaves. The free cities, ever wary of Drogo's growing power, began to watch him closely, noting his rapid expansion and the growing strength of his Khalisar. Meanwhile, the Seven Kingdoms, under the rule of King Robert Baratheon, began to take notice of the rising threat across the narrow sea. Robert, a man who had once toppled the Targaryen dynasty, knew that the return of the dragons, or rather, the rise of a new Targaryen in the form of Drogo's son, would threaten the fragile stability of his rule. But Drogo was no fool. He was well aware that the Seven Kingdoms were already plotting against him. Assassins had already been sent to eliminate him, but they had failed. Back in the free cities, Varys, the master of whispers, recognized the changing tides. He saw an opportunity for manipulation, for steering events in his favor. He met with his allies in secret, plotting to control the inevitable rise of Drogo's empire. He knew that Daenerys Targaryen's son might very well be the one to unite the world, and such a power could not be allowed to rise unchecked. Meanwhile, Jon Connington and the Golden Company had their own plans. Connington, loyal to the Targaryen bloodline, rallied the forces of the free cities in preparation for Aegon Targaryen's return. His campaign to take the throne, with the support of the free cities, was gaining momentum. Yet, even as Connington rallied troops for the invasion of Westeros, Drogo's influence over the Dothraki and his growing empire made him a much more dangerous adversary. As Drogo's Khalisar continued to sweep across the lands, defeating rival tribes and taking captives, the free cities began to feel the pressure. They had seen the brutality of the Dothraki, and they knew that something had to be done before Drogo's forces reached their borders. But the task of stopping him would be no small feat. The stage was now set for a collision of powers. Drogo's ambitions, Daenerys' influence, and the rising threat of Aegon Targaryen's claim to the throne would all converge, reshaping the fate of the Seven Kingdoms and the free cities forever. But as Drogo's forces continued to grow, one thing was certain: the world would never be the same again.